They told me I wasn't invited to the family reunion because there wasn't enough space in the cabin. Then I saw the photos online. My brother's new girlfriend had my room, sleeping in my childhood bed, wearing my grandmother's jewelry that was supposed to be mine. When I texted asking why no one mentioned this, my mother replied, "Stop being dramatic, Iris. We thought you'd be too busy with work anyway." I stared at that message for what felt like an hour, sitting in my pristine Los Angeles apartment with its view of the Hollywood Hills. The sunset was painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, but all I could see was that text, "Too busy with work." They didn't ask if I was busy. They just decided for me and gave away my space, my belongings, my place in the family to a stranger my brother had been dating for 3 months. My name is Iris Chen, and for the past 9 years, I've been building empires out of pixels and code as a lead product designer at Zenith Digital Solutions. I design the apps you probably use every day without thinking about them, the meditation timer that helps you sleep, the budgeting tool that stopped you from overspending last month, the delivery interface that brings your groceries to your door. My job is to make technology feel invisible, intuitive, like it was always meant to work exactly that way. I'm very good at making things seamless for other people. I learned that skill long before I ever touched a computer. I learned it at my family's dinner table, where I spent 18 years trying to smooth over the rough edges of my own existence so I wouldn't be too much trouble. I was 27 years old, sitting cross-legged on my cream-colored sofa, holding my phone like it was a live grenade. The message from my mother was so casual, so dismissive, that it took my breath away. "Stop being dramatic." Those 3 words had been the soundtrack to my entire childhood. Anytime I expressed hurt, anytime I asked for something, anytime I dared to suggest that maybe I mattered too, those words came out like a verbal slap. "Stop being dramatic, Iris. You're making a scene, Iris. Why can't you just be easy like your brother Iris?" This is Revenge Stories, a home for quiet courage and true endings. If you feel my words, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Help us build this community so we can bring more interesting and exciting stories for you from around the world. Your help is much appreciated. Your voice matters here. Your story matters too. The family reunion in question was happening right now, this very weekend, at a lakeside cabin in Big Bear. My parents had been planning it for 6 months. I had marked it on my calendar in bright red ink back in April. I had requested the time off from work. I had bought a new swimsuit specifically for the lake. I had even picked out gifts for everyone, carefully chosen items that showed I remembered their interests and cared about their lives, a vintage vinyl record for my father who collected jazz, a handmade pottery mug for my mother who always complained about her coffee getting cold, a first edition book for my brother Marcus who fancied himself an intellectual. Those gifts were sitting in a shopping bag by my front door right now, wrapped in expensive paper with silk ribbons, waiting for a trip that apparently I was never actually invited to. The photos had appeared on my mother's Facebook page 2 hours ago. She had titled the album "Chen Family Together Again." With a dozen heart emojis, I scrolled through them slowly, each one a small knife sliding between my ribs. There was my father at the grill, wearing his ridiculous kiss the cook apron. There was my mother laughing on the deck, holding a glass of white wine. There was Marcus with his arm around Sienna, his new girlfriend, both of them grinning like they'd won the lottery. And there, in the background of one photo, visible through the window of the cabin, I could see my childhood bedroom, the one with the window seat I used to read in for hours, the one with the view of the pine trees. Sienna was standing in that room. She was wearing what looked like my grandmother's jade necklace. My grandmother Nai had passed away 3 years ago. She had specifically told me that necklace would be mine. She had held my hand in her hospital bed and said, "Iris, this is for you. Your mother has her own jewelry. This one is yours because you are like me. You see things. You feel things deeply." My mother had nodded along when Nai said this. She had even written it down in the little notebook she kept for estate planning. And now it was hanging around the neck of a woman I had never even met. I zoomed in on the photo until Sienna's face filled my screen. She was pretty in that effortless way some people are, with long, dark hair and perfect skin. She was laughing at something off camera. She looked comfortable. She looked like she belonged. I opened my text thread with Marcus. The last message was from me, 2 weeks ago, asking if he wanted to carpool to Big Bear. He had never responded. I started typing. Hey, I see you guys are at the cabin. Mom said there wasn't room for me, but it looks like Sienna is staying in my old room. Just curious what happened. I stared at the message. It was so careful, so non-accusatory. I hated how much effort I was putting into not sounding upset. I deleted it. I tried again. Why wasn't I invited to the reunion? Too direct. Too confrontational. They would say I was being dramatic. I deleted that too. Finally, I just typed, "Hope you're all having fun." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Then I put my phone face down on the couch and walked to my kitchen. I needed to do something with my hands. I pulled out ingredients for dinner even though I wasn't hungry. Pasta, garlic, olive oil. The simple mechanical actions of cooking might stop my hands from shaking. My phone buzzed. Once. Twice. 3 times in quick succession. I left it on the couch. I minced the garlic with more force than necessary. The sharp, clean smell of it filled my small kitchen. My apartment was beautiful. I had worked hard to make it exactly what I wanted. Everything was carefully chosen, from the mid-century modern furniture to the plants on the windowsill to the art on the walls. It was my sanctuary, my proof that I had made something of myself despite coming from a family that treated me like an optional accessory, but standing there in my beautiful kitchen, crying over a cutting board full of garlic, I felt like I was 10 years old again. I was 10 years old the first time they left me behind. It was supposed to be a family trip to Disneyland for Marcus's 8th birthday. My parents had been planning it for months. I had helped Marcus make a list of all the rides he wanted to go on. I had saved my allowance to buy a new dress with Minnie Mouse on it. The night before we were supposed to leave, my mother sat me down at the kitchen table. She had that look on her face, the one that meant she was about to deliver bad news that was actually good news for her. "Iris, sweetheart," she said, reaching across the table to pat my hand. "We've been doing some math, and the hotel room is more expensive than we thought. It only has 2 beds, and they charge extra for a rollaway. Since you're the oldest and the most mature, we thought you could stay with Auntie Wei this weekend. Won't that be fun? She said she'll take you to the library." I remember sitting very still, trying to understand. "But it's a family trip," I said. My voice was small. I was trying not to cry because crying meant I was being dramatic. "We are a family trip," my mother said briskly. "This is just more practical. Marcus really wants to go for his birthday, and you know how he gets when he's disappointed. You're old enough to understand, aren't you?" I nodded. I said I understood. I spent that weekend at Auntie Wei's apartment, which smelled like mothballs and old cooking oil. She meant well, but she was elderly and didn't really know what to do with a 10-year-old. She let me watch television and eat instant noodles. On Sunday evening, when my parents came to pick me up, they were sunburned and exhausted and full of stories about the Magic Kingdom. Marcus wouldn't stop talking about Space Mountain. My mother had bought me a t-shirt from the gift shop. It was too small and had Goofy on it, not even a princess like I would have wanted. "See?" my mother said as she handed it to me. "We thought of you. We're a family even when we're apart." But we weren't apart, I thought, even then. You were together. I was somewhere else. That was the first time, but it wasn't the last. The pattern repeated itself over and over throughout my childhood, each iteration a little different, but fundamentally the same. When I was 13, my parents took Marcus to New York for a week during spring break. They said they couldn't afford tickets for all of us, that times were tight, that I would be fine staying with my friend Hannah's family. I found out later that they had stayed at a hotel that cost $300 a night. My plane ticket would have been $200. When I was 16, they went on a cruise to Alaska. It's an adult trip, my mother explained. You'd be bored. There's nothing for teenagers to do on a cruise ship. I saw the photos later. They had taken Marcus, who was 14. Apparently, 14-year-old boys are adults, but 16-year-old girls are still children. When I graduated from college with honors, with a degree in interaction design that I had worked my fingers to the bone for, my parents didn't come to the ceremony. "It's such a long flight from San Diego," my mother said on the phone. "And your father's back has been bothering him. You understand, don't you? We'll celebrate when you come home for Christmas." They didn't come home for Christmas that year either. They went to Hawaii with Marcus and his college roommates. They posted photos of themselves on the beach, wearing leis and holding Mai Tais. "We needed a break," my mother said when I called, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's been a stressful year. You're so independent, Iris. We knew you'd be fine on your own." I spent that Christmas in my tiny studio apartment in San Francisco, eating takeout Chinese food and watching other people's families ice skate at Union Square. That was the Christmas I decided I was done trying to fit into their picture. I was done shrinking myself down to make room for everyone else. I was done being the understanding one, the mature one, the one who would be fine on her own. I got very, very good at being on my own. I threw myself into my work. I moved from San Francisco to Los Angeles for a better job. I made friends, good friends who actually showed up for me. I built a life that didn't depend on waiting for my family to remember I existed, but every year when the holidays rolled around, that old, desperate hope would resurface. Maybe this year would be different. Maybe this year they would actually want me there. Maybe this year I would finally be part of the family portrait instead of the person holding the camera. The water for the pasta was boiling. I dumped in the spaghetti and watched it soften and bend in the roiling water. My phone was still buzzing on the couch. I could hear it from here, a persistent angry bee of notifications. I walked over and picked it up. 11 text messages, 7 from my mother, 3 from Marcus, 1 from my father. I opened my mother's first. "Iris, why are you being like this? We told you about this weeks ago. You said you had a work thing. Now you're trying to make us feel guilty? This is exactly why we didn't push you to come. You always make everything about you. Marcus's girlfriend is lovely and she's family now, so get used to it." I read them twice, then 3 times. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. They told me weeks ago? They didn't. I would have remembered. I checked my texts, my emails, my voicemails. Nothing. Not a single mention of the reunion being this weekend or any weekend. The last text from my mother before today was from 2 months ago asking if I could recommend a good moisturizer. Marcus's texts were shorter, more annoyed. "Seriously? You're doing this now? Mom is upset and Dad is pissed. Sienna feels terrible and she didn't even do anything." My father, who rarely texted, had sent just one message. "Disappointed in you, Iris. Family comes first." The laugh that came out of my throat was harsh and broken. Family comes first. Family comes first for everyone except me. Apparently, I was the variable that could be subtracted from any equation to make the math work better for everyone else. I sat down hard on my couch. The pasta was going to overcook. I didn't care. I opened my mother's Facebook page again and scrolled through her photos from the past year. It was a greatest hits compilation of Marcus's life. Marcus at his college graduation, Marcus at his new job, Marcus and Sienna at a restaurant, Marcus and Sienna hiking, Marcus and Sienna at a concert. There were probably 100 photos of my brother from just the past 6 months. I scrolled back further, looking for myself. I found one photo from my birthday last year. I was standing awkwardly next to my mother, both of us holding glasses of wine at a restaurant she had chosen. I was smiling, but it didn't reach my eyes. The caption said, "Birthday lunch with my daughter." No name, just daughter. Like I was a role she occasionally remembered to fill rather than a person. I went to my saved photos and found the picture from my promotion party 3 months ago. My friend Becca had thrown it for me when I made lead designer. It was at a nice rooftop bar in West Hollywood. 20 people had come, friends and colleagues who were genuinely happy for me. I was wearing a blue dress, and I was actually smiling, really smiling, surrounded by people who cared. I had sent that photo to my mother. She had responded, "Nice dress," and nothing else. My phone rang. It was my mother. I stared at her name on the screen, watching it ring and ring. I didn't answer. It went to voicemail. She called again immediately. Again, I let it ring out. She called a third time. This time, I answered, "Hello, Mom." "Iris, what is going on with you?" Her voice was high and tight, the way it got when she was working herself up to a full-blown lecture. "I have been trying to reach you for hours." I was making dinner. "Do you have any idea how upset you've made everyone? Marcus is beside himself. Sienna is crying in the bedroom. Your father won't even speak to me because he's so frustrated with this whole situation." I waited. I knew the pattern. She would vent, I would apologize, and everything would go back to normal. Except this time, something in me had shifted. Something had finally, irrevocably broken. "What situation, Mom?" I asked. My voice was very calm, too calm. "The situation where you told me there wasn't room for me at the reunion, gave my bedroom to a stranger, and let her wear Nine-Eye's necklace that was supposed to be mine?" "Oh, for heaven's sake," my mother snapped. "This again. Sienna is not a stranger. She's your brother's girlfriend, and that necklace was just sitting in a drawer. What's the harm in letting her borrow it for the weekend?" "It's not about the necklace, Mom." "Then what is it about? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're throwing a tantrum because you weren't the center of attention for once." I closed my eyes. I counted to 5. "When did you tell me about the reunion?" "What?" "You said you told me weeks ago." "When?" There was a pause. I could hear voices in the background, probably my father asking what was taking so long. "I don't know, Iris. I told everyone at the same time. In the family chat, probably." I checked the family chat. The last message is from March. It's June. "Well, then I must have told you when we talked on the phone." "We haven't talked on the phone in 2 months. "That's not my fault. You're always so busy with your important job." The words were laced with sarcasm. "I can't keep track of every little conversation." "So you didn't tell me." "I must have. Why would I deliberately not invite my own daughter?" And there it was, the question I had been asking myself for 17 years. Why would you deliberately not invite your own daughter? The answer, I was finally starting to understand, was that it wasn't deliberate at all. It was simply that including me required effort, and not including me was easier. "I don't know, Mom," I said quietly. "Why would you?" "Don't you dare try to make me the villain here. I have bent over backwards for you your entire life. Do you have any idea how hard it was raising you? You were such a difficult child, so sensitive, so needy, always wanting attention. Your brother was easy. He just fit in. But you always had to make things complicated. The words should have hurt. They would have hurt an hour ago, but something in me had gone very cold and very still. I felt like I was listening to her from a great distance, like she was a stranger describing someone I used to know. "I'm going to go now, Mom," I said. "We're not done talking about this." "I think we are." "If you hang up on me right now, Iris, I swear." I hung up. I turned off my phone completely. Then I walked to my kitchen, dumped the overcooked pasta into the trash, and poured myself a very large glass of wine. I stood at my window, watching the sun finish setting over Los Angeles. The sky was dark purple now, streaked with the last stubborn rays of gold. Somewhere in Big Bear, my family was probably sitting down to dinner. They were probably relieved I had hung up. Now they could go back to enjoying their perfect family reunion without the dramatic daughter ruining everything with her pesky feelings and inconvenient memory. I thought about Nai. She would have been so angry if she knew they had given away her necklace. She had been the only person in my family who ever really saw me, who ever treated me like I mattered. When she got sick, I was the one who visited her every week in the hospital. I was the one who held her hand and read to her and helped her eat when her hands got too shaky. My parents came once a month. Marcus came twice the entire year she was dying. "You have a good heart, Xiao Iris," she told me near the end, using the affectionate nickname she'd had for me since I was small little Iris. "Don't let them make you think something is wrong with you just because you feel things. The world needs people who feel things. Your mother, she learned to shut her heart down to survive. Your brother, he never had to open his in the first place. But you kept yours open even when it hurt. That takes courage." I hadn't felt very courageous. I had felt like a fool. I had felt like I was begging for scraps of love from people who saw me as a burden rather than a blessing. But standing there in my apartment, phone off, wine in hand, I felt something new. I felt angry. Not the hot, explosive anger that burns itself out quickly. This was cold and clear and sharp as a surgical blade. This was the anger of someone who had finally seen the truth and decided they were done pretending otherwise. I opened my laptop. I pulled up my banking app. The number in my savings account made me blink. I had been hoarding money for years, living below my means, saving for some nebulous future emergency. I had $83,000 just sitting there, earning minimal interest, waiting for something. I opened a new browser tab. I typed in Luxury Wellness Retreats, California. I wasn't going to sit in my apartment feeling sorry for myself. I wasn't going to spiral into self-doubt wondering what I did wrong. I was going to take the money I had earned through my own hard work, money they had never contributed to or had any claim on, and I was going to spend it on myself. I was going to disappear for a while. Not to punish them, I realized with sudden clarity. They wouldn't even notice I was gone. But because I needed to figure out who I was when I wasn't constantly trying to earn a place in a family that had never saved one for me. The first result that came up was a place called Stillwater Sanctuary. It was in Big Sur, perched on cliffs overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The website showed minimalist rooms with floor-to-ceiling windows, meditation pavilions surrounded by redwood trees, organic farm-to-table meals, and a spa that promised to reconnect you with your most authentic self. I laughed out loud. Reconnect with my most authentic self. That was exactly what I needed. I had spent 27 years trying to be the daughter they wanted, the quiet one, the understanding one, the one who didn't make waves. What would it feel like to just be myself, whoever that was? I clicked on the rates: $2,000 a night for a private suite, 7 nights minimum. That was $14,000 before meals and spa treatments. A year ago, I would have closed the browser immediately. That was irresponsible. That was frivolous. That was the kind of thing dramatic people did when they wanted attention. I pulled up the booking page and entered my credit card information. Confirmation email arrived in my inbox 90 seconds later. I had just spent $14,000 on a week at a wellness retreat, and I felt more clear-headed than I had in years. I picked up my phone and turned it back on. It immediately started buzzing with new messages. I ignored them all. I opened my text thread with Ava, my best friend. Ava and I had met in college, and she was the kind of friend who would help you hide a body without asking questions. She was also a corporate lawyer who didn't take shit from anyone, and I desperately needed some of her energy right now. "Emergency," I typed. "Need to talk. You free?" 3 dots appeared immediately. "Always free for you, babe. Call me." I hit the call button. She answered on the first ring. "What happened?" I told her everything. The reunion I wasn't invited to, the photos, the messages, my grandmother's necklace, the phone call with my mother. Every word came pouring out in a rush, and when I was done, I felt emptied out, wrung dry. Ava was silent for a long moment. Then she said very calmly, "I need you to listen to me very carefully, Iris. Your family is toxic. Like, clinically, objectively toxic. And I know you know this on some level, but I need you to really hear it. They have been systematically excluding you and gaslighting you about it for your entire life. That's abuse. Do you understand that? That's emotional abuse. I know, I whispered. I think I've always known. I just kept hoping that they'd change, that they'd wake up one day and realize what they were doing. I know, honey, but they're not going to change. People like that don't change because they don't think they're doing anything wrong. In their minds, you're the problem for having feelings about how they treat you. My mom said I was a difficult child. Your mom is rewriting history to justify her behavior. You weren't difficult. You were neglected. There's a difference. Ava's voice was fierce. So what are you going to do now? I booked a week at a wellness retreat in Big Sur. Good. That's really good. When? It starts Monday. Even better. So you have tomorrow to pack and prepare. Here's what I want you to do. You're going to write an email to your family, not a long one, just short and factual. Tell them you'll be away for a week at a private retreat with no phone service. Tell them not to contact you and that you'll reach out when you're ready. Then you're going to send it and you're going to block their numbers for the week. Block them? My voice came out higher than I intended. Yes, block them. You need space, real space, to figure out what you want your relationship with them to look like going forward, if it exists at all. You think I should cut them off completely? I think you need to consider all your options without them in your ear telling you you're being dramatic. Look, I'm not saying you have to cut them off forever, but you need to set some serious boundaries, and right now you're in no state to do that while they're actively harassing you. She was right. I knew she was right. Okay, I said. I'll do it. Good. And Iris, I'm proud of you. You just spent $14,000 on yourself without asking anyone's permission. That's growth. I laughed. It came out a little watery. Is it growth or is it a mental breakdown? With you, babe, probably a little of both, but the good kind. The kind where you burn down the old life to make room for a better one. Now go take a bath, drink that wine, and get some sleep. Tomorrow you're going to write that email and then you're going to pack. And on Monday, you're going to drive up the coast to your fancy retreat and you're going to figure out who Iris Chen actually is when she's not performing daughter for people who don't appreciate the show. After we hung up, I did exactly what she said. I took a long, hot bath with expensive bath salts I'd been saving for a special occasion. I decided tonight was special enough I drank the rest of the wine. I went to bed early and surprisingly, I slept. I slept better than I had in months. The next morning, I woke up to 63 new notifications. I didn't read any of them. Instead, I made myself a proper breakfast, something I almost never did on weekends. Scrambled eggs with chives, sourdough toast with real butter, fresh strawberries, and coffee from the good beans I kept for special occasions. I ate slowly, sitting at my small dining table instead of standing over the sink or eating in front of my laptop like usual. Then I opened my computer and wrote the email. Ava was right, short and factual. Mom, Dad, and Marcus. I'm taking a personal retreat for the next week at a private facility with limited connectivity. I need some time to myself, and I won't be reachable by phone or email. I'll contact you when I return. Please respect my need for space. Iris. I read it 5 times, looking for anything they could twist or use against me. It was clean, professional, unemotional. I added all 3 of them to the recipient line and hovered my cursor over the send button. My phone rang. It was Marcus. I declined the call. It rang again immediately. My mother this time. Declined. Then my father. Declined. I hit send on the email. Then I blocked all 3 of their numbers, just like Ava had suggested. The silence that followed was startling. My phone stopped buzzing. The constant low-level anxiety I'd been carrying since yesterday began to ease. Just slightly, like a muscle I'd been clenching for years was finally allowed to relax. I spent the rest of Sunday packing. I pulled out my nicest casual clothes, the ones I never wore because they seemed too good for everyday life, soft linen pants and cashmere sweaters. a silk robe I'd bought on sale and never removed from its packaging, my favorite books, the ones I kept meaning to reread my journal, which I hadn't written in for months. I packed my laptop, but I promised myself I wouldn't check work email. This week was for me. That night, I had one moment of doubt. I was folding a sweater when my hands started shaking and tears sprang to my eyes without warning. What if I was being dramatic? What if this was all a huge overreaction? What if my mother was right and I was just making everything about me? I picked up my phone. Not to unblock them, but to look at those Facebook photos again. I made myself really look at them. My childhood bedroom given to a stranger. My grandmother's necklace on someone else's throat. My entire family together, happy, complete without me. Not just this time. Every time. I put the phone down. I wasn't being dramatic. I was being honest. There was a difference. Monday morning arrived with typical Los Angeles sunshine, bright and merciless. I loaded my car, a sensible gray Honda that I'd bought used 3 years ago, and pointed it north. The drive from Los Angeles to Big Sur was about 5 hours depending on traffic, and I'd deliberately chosen to leave early to avoid the worst of it. As I merged onto the Pacific Coast Highway, something in my chest began to loosen. The ocean spread out to my left, endless and blue and utterly indifferent to my family drama. I rolled down the windows despite the wind whipping my hair everywhere. I turned up the music, some indie playlist I'd been meaning to listen to, and I drove. I'd driven this route before, but never alone and never for myself. Every other trip had been with friends, which meant compromise on where to stop and when to eat and how long to linger at scenic overlooks. This time I stopped whenever I wanted. I pulled over at a beach access point just past Malibu and walked down to the water. I took off my shoes and stood in the surf, letting the cold Pacific shock my system awake. I took a photo of my feet in the sand, the waves washing around my ankles, but I didn't post it anywhere. It was just for me. Around noon, I stopped at a small cafe in San Luis Obispo. It was the kind of place that served overpriced avocado toast and had succulents on every table, but the food was good and the coffee was better. I sat outside in the sun, eating slowly, watching people walk by with their dogs and their children and their uncomplicated Monday afternoons. A woman at the next table was on a video call, clearly working remotely. She was wearing pajama pants and a blazer, the universal uniform of pandemic holdovers who'd learned they could do their jobs from anywhere. She was smiling and nodding at whoever was on her screen, and when she hung up, she let out a huge sigh and muttered, "Thank God that's over." I caught her eye and smiled. She grinned back, sheepish. "Sorry, work call with my family's business. They still don't understand I moved to California to get away from them, not to zoom in for every tiny decision." "Family businesses are complicated," I said, surprising myself by engaging with a stranger. "The absolute worst," she agreed. "But what can you do? They're family." She said it like it was obvious. Like family was this immutable force you just had to accept. But sitting there in the sun, 3 hours away from my apartment and 6 hours away from Big Bear, where my family was probably wrapping up their perfect reunion, I thought, what if you don't? What if you just stop? I arrived at Stillwater Sanctuary around 4 in the afternoon. The entrance was marked by a simple wooden sign, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. A long driveway wound through towering redwoods before opening up to reveal the main building, a stunning piece of architecture that seemed to grow out of the cliff itself, all glass and natural wood and clean lines. A woman in her 50s with silver hair and the kind of serene expression that suggested either inner peace or really good medication greeted me at the entrance. "Welcome to Stillwater. You must be Iris Chen." "I am." "I'm Marlene. I'll be your primary guide during your stay. We're so glad you're here." She said it like she meant it, like my arrival was genuinely making her day better. It was such a stark contrast to my mother's irritation every time I showed up anywhere that I almost didn't know how to respond. "Thank you," I managed. Marlene walked me through the check-in process, which was refreshingly simple. No upsells, no hidden fees. She explained the schedule, which was more of a gentle suggestion than a rigid structure. There were group meditation sessions each morning at sunrise, optional yoga at midday, and communal dinners each evening. Everything else was self-directed. We find that people get the most out of their time here when they listen to what they need, rather than following someone else's agenda, Marlene explained as she led me down a stone pathway toward my suite. Some people spend the whole week in silence. Others talk to every person they meet. Some do all the activities. Others never leave their rooms. Whatever feels right for you is what's right. My suite was at the end of a private corridor, separated from the other guests by enough distance that I felt truly alone. Marlene unlocked the door and stepped aside to let me enter. First, I actually gasped. I couldn't help it. The room was gorgeous. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the ocean, waves crashing against rocks 100 feet below. The bed was enormous, covered in white linens that looked like clouds. There was a deep, soaking tub positioned right by the window, a meditation cushion in one corner, a small writing desk with an ocean view, and a private deck with a lounger. Meals are delivered here if you prefer privacy, or you can join us in the main dining hall, Marlene said. The spa menu is on the desk. You can book treatments anytime through the tablet. And if you need anything at all, there's a call button right here. She indicated a subtle button by the door. Otherwise, we won't disturb you unless you ask us to. After she left, I stood in the center of the room and turned in a slow circle, taking it all in $14,000. This was what $14,000 bought you. Not just luxury, but permission. Permission to take up space. Permission to have needs. Permission to exist without apologizing for it. I walked out onto the deck. The sun was starting to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. The sound of the waves was constant, rhythmic, like the Earth's own heartbeat. I sat down on the lounger and pulled out my phone. No service, not even a single bar. Marlene had mentioned that cell service was nearly non-existent here, that it was part of the appeal, but seeing those words, "no service," on my screen made my stomach drop for just a second. Then I realized what I was feeling wasn't panic. It was relief. They couldn't reach me. Even if I'd wanted to unblock them, even if I'd caved to that old, desperate need to fix things and smooth things over, I physically could not. I was unreachable. I was, for the first time in my entire life, completely and totally alone by choice. I sat there until the sun set completely and the sky turned deep purple, then black stars began to appear. More stars than I'd ever seen in Los Angeles, where light pollution washed out all but the brightest. Out here, the Milky Way was visible, a river of light spilling across the darkness. I thought about my family, probably back in San Diego by now, probably talking about how dramatic I was being, how I'd ruined the reunion with my selfishness. I thought about Sienna, still wearing my grandmother's necklace, probably thinking I was some kind of crazy jealous sister. I thought about Marcus, annoyed that I'd made his weekend about me instead of about him and his new relationship. And you know what? I didn't care. I really, genuinely didn't care what they thought. Maybe that would change tomorrow. Maybe in the harsh light of morning, I'd spiral back into doubt and guilt and that old, familiar desperation to be included. But right now, sitting on this deck with the ocean crashing below and the stars wheeling overhead, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt free. That first night, I barely slept. Not because I was anxious or upset, but because I couldn't stop listening to the ocean. In Los Angeles, I'd trained myself to sleep through traffic noise and sirens and the general chaos of the city. But this was different. This was the sound of something vast and ancient and utterly indifferent to human concerns. It was weirdly comforting. I got up at dawn without meaning to, pulled from sleep by light flooding through those massive windows. Instead of rolling over and trying to sleep more like I would have at home, I got up. I made tea in the small kitchenette using the fancy loose-leaf selection they'd provided, I sat on the deck, wrapped in the cashmere blanket from the bed, and watched the sun rise over the ocean. Marlene had mentioned sunrise meditation in the main pavilion, but I didn't go. I stayed right where I was, breathing in the salt air, letting my mind wander where it wanted. Without trying to direct it anywhere productive, I found myself thinking about Nai again. After she died, I'd been the one to clean out her apartment. My parents had been too emotional to handle it, and Marcus had been too busy with work. So it fell to me, the reliable one, the one who could be counted on to handle difficult things without complaint. I'd found a box in her closet labeled Iris in her shaky handwriting. Inside were things I'd made for her over the years, drawings from when I was little, cards from holidays, a terrible clay bowl I'd made in a middle school art class. She'd kept everything. At the very bottom of the box was a letter in a sealed envelope with my name on it. I'd read it standing in her empty apartment, surrounded by boxes and the ghost of her jasmine perfume. The letter was in Chinese, which she knew I could read even though I rarely spoke it. She wrote about how proud she was of me, how strong I'd become despite everything. And then, near the end, "Your mother learned to protect herself by becoming hard. She was soft once, like you, but life beat it out of her. Now she cannot stand softness in others because it reminds her of what she lost. This is not your fault. You did not break her. She broke herself, and now she tries to break you too, so she doesn't have to feel so alone in her hardness. Do not let her. Stay soft. Stay feeling. The world needs your softness, even if your mother cannot appreciate it." I'd cried so hard reading that letter that I'd had to sit down on her floor. I'd kept it, tucked away in a drawer at home, but I hadn't looked at it again. It hurt too much. Now, sitting on this deck watching the sun climb higher, I wondered what Nai would think of this moment. Would she be proud of me for leaving, for choosing myself? Or would she think I was giving up on family, breaking some sacred obligation? I thought I knew the answer. She'd told me to stay soft, but she'd also told me I was strong. Being strong enough to walk away from people who hurt you, even if they were family, especially if they were family, that was its own kind of softness. It was being soft enough to acknowledge pain instead of hardening yourself to it. Around 9, there was a gentle knock on my door. I opened it to find a young man in the Stillwater uniform holding a tray. "Breakfast," he said with a smile. "The kitchen wasn't sure what you'd like, so they sent a bit of everything." "Hope that's okay." The tray was loaded: fresh fruit, yogurt with honey and nuts, eggs cooked 3 different ways, toast, pastries, juice, coffee. It was enough food for 3 people. "This is amazing, thank you." "Enjoy. And hey, if you want company, there's usually a group that eats together in the dining hall. Pretty chill people, but no pressure." After he left, I spread the feast out on the small table on my deck and ate until I was genuinely full, not performing fullness to be polite or restricting myself because I thought I should, just eating until my body said it was satisfied. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled out my journal. The last entry was from 6 months ago, a frantic scribble about a work deadline and stress. Before that, entries were sparse and mostly functional: to-do lists, meeting notes, nothing personal, nothing real. I turned to a fresh page. I wrote the date, and then I just started writing. I wrote about the reunion. I wrote about every single time my family had left me out. Going all the way back to Disneyland when I was 10, I wrote about the cruise and New York and Alaska and my college graduation and Christmas in Hawaii. I wrote about how I'd convinced myself each time that there was a good reason, that it made sense, that I was being understanding and mature. I wrote about Nai's necklace and how seeing it on Sienna felt like a betrayal, not just from my family, but from the universe itself. I wrote about my mother calling me dramatic and difficult and needy. I wrote about Marcus never responding to my texts and my father's disappointed in you message. I wrote until my hand cramped. I wrote until I'd filled 20 pages, and when I finally stopped, I felt like I'd lanced a wound that had been festering for decades. This is Revenge Stories, a home for quiet courage and true endings. If you feel my words, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Help us build this community so we can bring more interesting and exciting stories for you from around the world. Your help is much appreciated. Your voice matters here. Your story matters too. Over the next few days, I fell into a rhythm. I woke with the sun. I meditated, not in any structured way, just sitting with my thoughts without trying to fix or control them. I took long walks on the trails that wound through the property, paths that led to hidden beaches and groves of redwoods so tall they seemed to touch the sky. I met other guests in passing. A woman named Claire who was recovering from a divorce and learning to be alone without being lonely. A man named David who'd just sold his company and was trying to figure out what came next. A couple, Tom and Jennifer, who came here every year to reconnect away from the noise of their regular lives. No one asked invasive questions. No one pushed for my story. When I offered pieces of it, they listened without trying to fix me or tell me how I should feel. It was extraordinary how healing it was to just be heard without judgment. On the third night, there was a bonfire on the beach. Marlene had mentioned it casually, said people often found it meaningful, but again, no pressure. I almost didn't go. The idea of being social, even gentle Stillwater social, felt like too much. But something pulled me down the path to the beach as the sun was setting. About 15 people were gathered around a large fire pit. Someone was playing guitar softly. People were talking in low voices or just sitting in comfortable silence. Watching the flames, I found a spot on a log near the edge of the circle. Claire, the woman I'd chatted with a few times, smiled and moved over to make room for me. "Glad you came," she said simply. After a while, Marlene stood up. "For those who haven't been to a fire circle before, this is a space for letting go. If there's something you're carrying that you want to release, you can write it on these pieces of paper." She gestured to a basket being passed around. "And throw it into the fire. You don't have to share what it is out loud. The fire doesn't judge. It just transforms." I took a piece of paper and a pen. When the basket reached me, I stared at the blank page for a long time. What did I want to let go of? Finally, I wrote, "The belief that I have to earn love by being less." I folded the paper carefully. When it was my turn, I walked up to the fire. The heat of it hit me in a wave. I held the paper for a moment, this tiny piece of myself distilled into 8 words, and then I tossed it in. The paper caught immediately, curling and blackening and disappearing into ash in seconds. I watched it burn and something in my chest cracked open, not painfully. More like a door I'd been holding shut, finally being allowed to swing free. I went back to my spot and Claire squeezed my hand briefly. We sat there until the fire burned down to embers and the stars came out in full force. On the 5th day, I broke my own rule and checked my email on the tablet in my room. There was Wi-Fi, just no cell service, and I'd been so good about staying away from work and family drama that I felt like I could handle a quick check without spiraling. I had emails from my boss, all routine stuff that my backup was handling fine. I had emails from friends, mostly Ava checking in to make sure I was okay. I had 3 emails from my mother. I almost didn't open them, but curiosity won out. The first one, sent the day after I'd left, was short and angry. "Iris, this is childish. You can't just run away every time your feelings get hurt. We need to talk about this like adults." The second one, sent 2 days later, was longer and attempted to be conciliatory. "I've been thinking about our conversation and I realize maybe I was too harsh. You know how I get when I'm stressed. The reunion was stressful and I took it out on you. Can we please talk? Your father is very upset and Marcus is confused about why you're so angry. Please call me." The third one had arrived this morning. This one was different. The subject line was, "Fine." "Fine, Iris. If you want to throw away your family over nothing, that's your choice. Don't come crawling back when you realize how lonely life is without us. Marcus and Sienna are getting engaged next month. I'm sure you won't care since you've made it clear we don't matter to you. But just so you know, the party is August 15th. You're invited, though I doubt you'll come. You never do anything for this family unless it benefits you. I read it twice. Then I closed the tablet and walked out onto my deck. The thing was, I'd expected to feel hurt. I'd expected to feel guilty. I'd expected that old familiar panic of what if she's right? What if I'm the problem? What if I'm being selfish? But I didn't feel any of that. What I felt was clarity. She was still doing it. Even now, even after everything, she was rewriting history in real time. I never did anything for the family. I was the one who visited Nai every week. I was the one who cleaned out her apartment. I was the one who always sent birthday cards and Christmas gifts and made an effort to stay connected even when they couldn't be bothered to return a text. And that last line, "You're invited, though I doubt you'll come," was so perfectly calculated. She was inviting me in a way that was designed to make me feel unwelcome. It was an invitation that was actually a dig. If I came, I'd be proving her wrong, but walking into an environment where I'd be punished for it. If I didn't come, I'd be proving her right and she'd have more ammunition for the Iris is selfish narrative. It was a trap. The whole relationship was a trap, and I'd been caught in it for 27 years. I picked up the journal I'd been writing in and flipped to a fresh page. I wrote a letter I would never send. Mom, you're right about one thing. I am making a choice. I'm choosing not to spend the rest of my life begging for a seat at a table where I'm not wanted. I'm choosing not to twist myself into smaller and smaller shapes, trying to fit into spaces you've made clear weren't meant for me. You say I never do anything for this family, but what I think you mean is I don't do things that make you look good. I don't provide the right kind of daughter performance. I don't know how to be as easy as Marcus, because Marcus has never had to earn his place. He's always just had it, automatically, by virtue of being born second and male and more like Dad. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just tired. I'm tired of trying to solve the puzzle of why you don't love me the way I need to be loved. I'm tired of making excuses for you. I'm tired of being the understanding one. I'm going to miss Marcus's engagement party. Not because I'm trying to hurt you or punish you, but because I don't want to spend an entire evening being ignored or insulted while everyone pretends we're a happy family. I don't want to watch Sienna wear Nai's necklace and smile through it. I don't want to be the difficult daughter one more time. I want to be free, and the only way to be free is to stop participating in a dynamic that requires me to be small. I hope someday you understand that. I hope someday you look back and see what you did, not just to me, but to yourself by becoming someone who couldn't love your own daughter unless she performed that daughter role perfectly. But whether you ever understand or not, I'm done waiting for that understanding. I'm done waiting for you to see me. I see myself, and that's going to have to be enough. Iris. I closed the journal. I felt calm, clear, ready. On my last full day at Stillwater, I booked a massage and a session in the thermal pools. The massage therapist asked if there were any areas I was holding tension, and I almost laughed. Everywhere, I said. 27 years of everywhere. She worked on my shoulders, my neck, the knots in my back that I'd stopped even noticing were there. You're holding a lot in your chest, she said softly. Right here around your heart. When was the last time you cried, really cried? I don't know, a long time. Might be time, she said, and she pressed her thumb into a pressure point that made something release. Tears started flowing before I could stop them. Not sad tears exactly, just release. Old grief that had been packed down until there was no more room for it. That's good, the therapist murmured. Let it out. Your body has been holding this for you. You can let it go now. I cried through the rest of the massage. I cried in the thermal pools, sitting in water that felt like being held. I cried back in my room, looking out at the ocean, letting decades of accumulated pain finally have its moment. And when I was done crying, I felt light. Not happy exactly, not yet, but unburdened. That night at dinner, I sat with Claire and David and Tom and Jennifer. We'd become a little group over the week, bonded by proximity and shared healing. "What's your plan when you leave?" Claire asked me. "Are you going back to your family or—" "No," I said. It was the first time I'd said it out loud. "I don't think so, not the way things were. Maybe someday if they're willing to acknowledge what happened and actually change, but I'm not holding my breath." "That's brave," Jennifer said. "Family stuff is so hard." "The hardest," Tom agreed. "We didn't talk to Jennifer's mother for 2 years. Had to, for our own sanity. She was making Jenny miserable, and I finally said, 'You know what? You don't have to keep lighting yourself on fire to keep her warm.'" I looked at him. "That's exactly how it feels." "The good news," Tom continued, "is that you get to build your own family now. The people who actually show up for you. We've got 2 kids and they have the best grandmother in the world. She's not related to us by blood. She's our former neighbor who became family because she actually acted like family blood doesn't mean anything if the behavior isn't there." I thought about Ava, who'd dropped everything to talk me through my crisis. I thought about my colleagues at work who'd thrown me a promotion party. I thought about the acquaintance who'd become my friend because we'd gotten coffee once, and she'd actually remembered what I told her and asked about it the next time we met. These were people who chose me, and I'd been so busy chasing blood family who didn't want me that I'd taken for granted the chosen family I already had. My last morning at Stillwater, I woke up before dawn one final time. I sat on my deck with tea and watched the sun rise over the ocean. I thought about what came next. I couldn't go back to my life exactly as it was. I'd changed too much in just a week, but I also wasn't sure what forward looked like yet. Then my tablet chimed. An email from work, from my boss Marcus. Yes, we had the same name. Life is funny that way. Subject: quick question when you're back. I opened it. "Iris, hope you're having a restorative time away. Quick thing. No rush. We just got approached by a potential client who wants to build a wellness app focused on family trauma and boundary setting. It's a big project, and I immediately thought of you. I know that's been something you've dealt with personally. Obviously no pressure if it's too close to home, but if you're interested, it could be yours to lead. Let's talk when you're back. Enjoy your last few days of peace." I stared at the screen. A wellness app about family trauma and boundaries. Led by me. Using everything I'd just learned, everything I'd just survived, to help other people navigate the same impossible situations. It felt like a sign, or maybe just a really good coincidence. Either way, it felt right. I wrote back, "Marcus, yes, absolutely yes. I'm in. Let's talk Monday when I'm back. Thank you for thinking of me." I sent it and closed the tablet. Then I packed my bags, checked out, and started the long drive back to Los Angeles. But this time, the drive felt different. I wasn't running away. I was running toward something, toward a life I was building deliberately, with intention, for myself. When I got home, there were packages outside my door. All 3 of them had my mother's return address. I carried them inside and opened them one by one. My Christmas gifts from last year, the ones that had been sitting by my door, waiting for a trip that never happened. The vinyl record for my father, the pottery mug for my mother, the first edition book for Marcus. All of them returned, unopened, with a note. "Since you didn't care enough to deliver these in person, we didn't want them." I looked at the 3 wrapped packages. I'd spent hours choosing them. I'd spent money I didn't really have at the time. I'd poured care into every selection, and they'd sent them back like I was returning an unwanted purchase to Amazon. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I just picked up my phone and called Ava. "Hey, babe, welcome back. How was the retreat?" "Life-changing." "Listen, are you free for dinner?" "For you? Always." "Good. Come over. I'm going to make pasta and I have a story to tell you, And then I need your legal expertise because I think I'm ready to write a letter to my family and I want to make sure I say it right. On my way. While I waited for Ava, I did something I'd been thinking about all week. I went to my closet and pulled out the box I'd brought home from Nai's apartment. I found her letter and I read it again, this time without crying. Stay soft, stay feeling. The world needs your softness even if your mother cannot appreciate it. I taped the letter to my bathroom mirror where I'd see it every morning. A reminder, not from my family, but from the one person in my family who'd actually loved me unconditionally. Then I unwrapped the gifts my family had returned. The vinyl record, the mug, the book. I set them on my shelf. Not because I was saving them to give again, but because I'd chosen them with care and they deserved to exist. I'd keep them. I'd use them. I'd let them remind me that I was capable of thoughtfulness and care even when it wasn't returned. That was my revenge, I realized. Not hurting them back, not making them pay, just living well, just building a life so full and rich and intentional that their absence from it was completely irrelevant, just being happy without them. And 3 months later, when the invitation to Marcus and Sienna's engagement party arrived in the mail, beautifully embossed and expensive, I didn't agonize over whether to go. I didn't spend sleepless nights wondering if this was my chance to repair things or if I'd regret missing it. I just checked my calendar, saw that I had plans that day, a hiking trip with Ava and some other friends from my chosen family, and I RSVP'd no. I didn't send a gift. I didn't send a card with an excuse. I just checked the box that said regretfully declines and sent it back, and when my mother called, I didn't answer. When she emailed, I replied with one line, "I hope you all have a wonderful celebration." That was it. No drama. No long explanation. No justification. Just a boundary, clearly stated and firmly held. Because I'd learned something important during my week at Stillwater. I'd learned that you don't owe people access to you just because they're family. You don't owe them your energy or your time or your emotional labor just because you share DNA. You get to choose who you let into your life, and you get to make that choice based on how people actually treat you, not on who you wish they would be. My family never apologized. They never acknowledged what they'd done. To this day, I'm sure they tell people I'm the one who abandoned them, that I'm dramatic and ungrateful and selfish. And you know what? I'm okay with that, because the people who matter, the people I've chosen and who've chosen me, they know the truth. The wellness app I designed, the one focused on family trauma and boundaries, launched a year after my trip to Stillwater. It was called Lighthouse because that's what good boundaries are. They're not walls that keep everyone out. They're lights that guide the right people in and warn the wrong people away. It won awards. It helped thousands of people. And every time someone sent me a message saying the app had helped them leave a toxic family situation or set a boundary they'd been afraid to set, I thought about that moment on the train of thought that led me to Big Sur. I thought about how the worst thing my family ever did to me, leaving me out one more time, had actually been the best thing because it had finally pushed me to choose myself. And I thought about Nai, who told me to stay soft, and how I'd learned that being soft didn't mean being weak. It meant being strong enough to feel everything, to acknowledge pain instead of hardening against it, and to walk away from people who mistook that softness for weakness they could exploit. This is Revenge Stories, a home for quiet courage and true endings. If you feel my words, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Help us build this community so we can bring more interesting and exciting stories for you from around the world. Your help is much appreciated. Your voice matters here. Your story matters too. My name is Iris Chen, and this is my story. Not about getting revenge on my family by destroying them, but about getting revenge by building something they can never touch or taint or take away from me, a life that's completely, entirely, beautifully mine. Thank you for listening.